What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle was nothing but an illusion? What if a detail that seemed so ordinary, so straightforward like her age, turned out to be a carefully hidden secret that the world was never supposed to uncover? Most people believe they already understand her story. They have followed her remarkable journey from being a television actress in Hollywood to becoming a central figure in the British royal family. They have read the endless headlines, watched documentaries, and formed their own opinions about her style, her personality, and the choices she has made throughout her life. But what if the one detail that everyone accepted without question was actually wrong? What if Meghan Markle, the woman who captured hearts across continents, was hiding something extraordinary right in front of our eyes, and even more shocking than that? What if the revelation came directly from the person who knows her more intimately than anyone else in the world, her mother, Doria Ragland? Before we move forward into this astonishing story, make sure to press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Because what you're about to hear could change everything you thought you knew. It all begins with a question that sounds far too simple, almost insignificant when you first hear it. How old is Meghan Markle? A question that should be effortless to answer correct. After all, birthdays are public knowledge. Official records exist, and she has been in the global spotlight for many years. Yet the truth is much more complicated than it appears, and the answer is far more shocking than anyone could have ever imagined. Because, according to her mother, Doria Ragland, Meghan Markle is not just a little older than the public has been led to believe. She is, in reality, 50 years old. Yes, 50. That is correct, 50 years of life. For those who are counting, that is half a century of experiences, half a century of struggles, and half a century of carefully polished public image that has successfully concealed the truth about her real age. You might be asking yourself, how on earth could this be possible? How could someone so famous, so relentlessly examined by the media, have something as fundamental as her age remain a hidden fact? The answer lies in a complex mix of media, manipulation, shifting public perception, and a deeply human desire for privacy. It is easy to believe that every detail of a celebrity's life can be found on the internet, in archives or in interviews. But the reality is different. Even in this modern digital era, certain truths can still be hidden in plain sight. People conceal details for many reasons: vanity, privacy, strategy, or even protection. And in Meghan's case, every single one of these motives appears to have played a part. Hollywood, the royal establishment, and the broader media industry each have their own strict rules about age, image, and presentation. Meghan Markle has manoeuvred through these demanding waters with an extraordinary skill that very few could replicate, keeping key parts of her life guarded closely. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on Meghan's path. Long before the world knew her name, before red carpets, before royal ceremonies, before documentaries and tabloid headlines, she was simply a determined young woman, ambitious and talented, working to carve out a career in an industry that is ruthlessly obsessed with youth and beauty. The public saw her in sleek suits, dazzling gowns and polished appearances. Yet very few saw the endless hours she spent preparing, rehearsing, and carefully planning the image she presented. Even fewer considered the level of control she had to exert in order to maintain that image flawlessly. In Hollywood, an actress's age can dictate everything: the role she is offered, the opportunities available to her, and the entire direction of her career. A single misstep, or the exposure of one inconvenient detail, can change everything overnight. Meghan clearly understood this reality, deliberately curating her public presence so that the world would see her exactly as she intended. Now imagine this entire situation through the eyes of her mother, Doria Ragland. A woman who herself has lived a full and layered life, who has seen her daughter grow from a curious little girl into a global icon. Doria knows Meghan better than anyone else in the world. She has witnessed her struggles, her triumphs, her private tears, and the painstaking construction of the persona Meghan has presented to millions. So, when Doria finally speaks openly about her daughter's true age, it is not just an offhand remark. It is a revelation powerful enough to shake the assumptions of millions across the globe. Because if Doria declares that Meghan is 50, then that is the truth. And that truth carries consequences that stretch far beyond a simple number. It reshapes how the public views Meghan, how the media crafts stories about her, and even how she might perceive herself. 50 is more than just a milestone in this setting, it is a bombshell revelation. But why reveal it now? Why would Doria Ragland choose this particular moment to speak out? The timing is everything. Public fascination with Meghan has never faded. Every headline, every interview, every public appearance is analysed for meaning and scrutinised for hidden significance. And within this constant storm of attention, certain truths have been kept tightly sealed, whispered only in private circles, never spoken aloud before the public. Doria's disclosure tears through that silence, forcing everyone to confront a fact that had either been ignored or quietly assumed away. It is a masterstroke of timing. The revelation arrives at the very moment when curiosity is at its highest, when the world is primed to question, to re-examine, and to be astonished. Now, consider the implications of such a truth. How does the public react when a figure they believe to be in her late 30s or early 40s is suddenly revealed to be 50? The psychology of shock, disbelief, and intrigue immediately comes into play. People experience cognitive dissonance. The images they have seen for years no longer align with the new information they are being told. They must reconcile Meghan's seemingly ageless youthful appearance with the reality of her true years. And it is precisely that tension, that contradiction, which makes this story so irresistibly compelling. This is not just about a number. It is about the narrative, the story behind the revelation, and the emotional journey it sets the audience on. Throughout this video, we will dive deep into that journey. We will begin with Meghan's early life, long before fame and the influences that helped shape her into the woman she became. We will explore her rise through Hollywood, an industry where careers are built on image and where perception of age often determines opportunity. From there, we will examine her transition into the royal family, a world where ancient tradition collides with the relentless gaze of modern media. And then we will follow the ripple effects of Doria Ragland's words, observing how the public, the press, and even Meghan herself respond to this stunning disclosure. Along the way, we will uncover hidden moments, surprising contradictions, and emotional turning points that elevate this story into something unforgettable. But even as we prepare to reveal these details, one truth remains clear. Doria's statement is not the end of the story. In fact, it is only the beginning. Because once the world learns Meghan's real age, the questions do not stop. They multiply. How did she successfully maintain this carefully crafted image for so many years? What does this revelation mean for her career, her relationships, her family, and ultimately her legacy? And perhaps the most pressing question of all, what other secrets still remain in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to finally come to light? The revelation of Meghan's true age is only the first domino to fall, the spark that sets off a chain reaction of discoveries certain to challenge long-held assumptions, provoke heated debate, and completely captivate audiences worldwide. And that is precisely our mission here. We are going to strip away the polished layers of public perception, diving deep into the crossroads where truth, image, and influence collide. We will confront the myths, expose the assumptions, and unravel the carefully crafted narratives that have defined Meghan Markle in the eyes of millions. And we will do this in a way that is vivid, emotional, and filled with unexpected twists. Every fact will serve as a thread woven into a much larger tapestry. Every anecdote will offer a rare glimpse behind the curtain. Every carefully chosen moment will build anticipation for the revelation that follows. By the end of this introduction, you will not only grasp the shocking claim about Meghan's age, but you will also see why it carries so much weight and why it has the potential to overturn everything you thought you knew about her. Yet even with this revelation hanging in the air, we are not left with closure, we are left standing at the edge of a cliff. Because the truth about Meghan Markle's age is not the only secret that has been fiercely guarded over the years. There are deeper layers, hidden motivations, and far-reaching consequences still locked away, waiting for the right moment to surface. The instant Doria Ragland spoke, the first protective layer fell away. But what followed in the aftermath would change everything, and no one could have predicted it. Have you ever stopped to wonder what truly shapes a person before the world even notices them? Before the cameras flash, before the red carpet lights blind them, before the tabloids whisper and the royal commentators speculate Meghan? Markle's story begins long before the public spectacle, in a world that very few could imagine. The Meghan we believe we know today, the graceful figure at royal ceremonies, the Hollywood actress with a polished career, was once simply a child filled with dreams, insecurities, and a budding sense of self, still trying to take shape. And it is within those early years that we begin to uncover the forces that defined her life, the patterns that guided her choices, and the quiet secrets that would eventually carve her path. Meghan was born in Los Angeles, a city of both glamour and grit, of dazzling opportunity and fierce competition. Growing up in such a sprawling, contradictory environment meant that she was surrounded by contrasts from the very beginning. On one side, the glittering promise of Hollywood shimmered. On the other, the daily struggles of ordinary life served as a constant reminder of reality. She was not born into privilege, as some may assume. Her childhood was layered, complex, and filled with equal parts support and challenge. Doria Ragland, her mother, stood firmly at the centre of it all. A woman defined by quiet strength, grace, and wisdom, Doria became the anchor of Meghan's world. It is no exaggeration to say that much of Meghan's resilience, her composure, and her ability to remain steady under the heaviest of scrutiny can be traced directly back to the lessons she absorbed from her mother. Yet, even during those formative years, contradictions began to surface. Meghan was an outwardly confident child, bright, curious, and intelligent. But beneath that confidence lay the insecurities of adolescence, the self-doubt and vulnerability that come with being judged before one even has the chance to define themselves. She had to navigate a world where outside expectations pressed heavily on her identity long before fame ever entered the picture. And this raises questions that linger. How does a young girl form a genuine sense of self when the outside world insists on shaping her before she is ready? How does one balance raw ambition with the ever-present fear of judgment? These were the challenges Meghan faced at the very beginning of her story. These were the questions Meghan wrestled with long before anyone outside her immediate family even cared to notice her existence. School became a crucial stage where her personality and resilience were constantly put to the test. Teachers remember a young girl who was articulate, endlessly curious, and at times a little restless. She had a natural presence that demanded attention, a charisma impossible for even her classmates to ignore. Yet behind this outward confidence was an ongoing struggle, the challenge of figuring out exactly where she belonged. She grew up in a diverse, multicultural household, constantly balancing influences from her mother, her father, and the varied communities she moved through. Did these early experiences shape the way she later navigated the treacherous landscapes of Hollywood and the royal world? Without question. Every obstacle she faced, Every fleeting moment of self-doubt and every bit of recognition she earned contributed to the construction of the public persona we recognise today. Her family dynamics added another layer of complexity. Meghan's relationship with her father was strained, defined by long stretches of distance and a pattern of misunderstanding. In contrast, Doria stood as a grounding force in her life, providing balance, guidance, and a much-needed sense of perspective. Imagine for a moment the weight of being a teenager, carrying world-class ambition, enduring the quiet stirrings of public curiosity, while also navigating a family structure that was sometimes fractured. These pressures, subtle yet powerful, were quietly shaping Meghan into someone extraordinary, someone destined to thrive under the harsh glare of a global spotlight. Even her hobbies and early interests carried a deeper importance than anyone could have guessed at the time. Meghan's passion for acting, her love of debate, and her skill in public speaking became more than pastimes. They were powerful outlets, safe spaces, where she could refine the very skills that would eventually propel her onto stages and platforms far grander than any school auditorium. Through those practices, she was learning how to perform, how to persuade, how to project confidence, even when uncertainty lingered underneath. At the same time, she was also learning discretion, how to reveal carefully chosen pieces of herself while keeping the most personal parts guarded. This dual mastery, the balance between exposure and protection, would later become vital tools in her adult life. Friends from those early years remember Meghan as fiercely independent, yet also deeply loyal. She formed close bonds, but she also learned at a young age that not everyone could be trusted. This early awareness of human behaviour, of motives, of intentions, both pure and manipulative, became an education in itself. Those lessons would serve her well in Hollywood, and even more so within the unforgiving and scrutinising environment of royal life. Every friendship, every betrayal, every lesson in trust and deception acted like rehearsals, preparing her for a future lived under the unrelenting lens of the public eye. And standing at the centre of all of this was Doria Ragland. She was not merely a mother, she was a mentor, a confidant, and above all, a protector. She understood the immense pressures Meghan carried, and deliberately took steps to prepare her daughter with resilience and strength. Yet Doria also carried her own secrets, memories, choices, and experiences she chose to keep hidden. Perhaps she did so partly to shield Meghan, but also because they were deeply personal truths not ready to be shared with the world. And it is exactly these layers, the unshakable mother-daughter bond, the early lessons in endurance, and the hidden complexities of family life, that make Doria's later revelation about Meghan's age so striking and so powerful. This is not a story that suddenly appeared. It is one that has been building quietly for decades. You may find yourself wondering if Meghan was always living under some form of observation. How could something as seemingly simple as her age remain unclear for so long? The answer lies in those formative experiences. From an early age, Meghan learned the importance of shaping her own narrative, of carefully controlling what the world was allowed to know about her. These lessons were never only about privacy, they were also about strategy. By the time she emerged as a recognisable public figure, she had already mastered the art of navigating the fine line between perception and reality. Even during her teenage years, subtle signs suggested that she understood exactly how people viewed her age and her appearance. Friends and mentors remember her as someone who instinctively grasped the optics of public perception. She knew how to project youthfulness while still appearing authoritative, how to seem approachable yet remain aspirational. Picture a teenager practicing the art of image management with the precision and awareness of someone far beyond her years. And yet, despite this early sophistication, the tension always lingered. How much of herself could she reveal without risking her identity? How could she remain authentic while still performing the role the outside world expected of her? These early contradictions, the desire to be noticed versus the need for privacy, the hunger for success versus the struggle to protect her true self, laid the foundation for the narrative that would one day dominate global headlines. They help explain why, even as an adult, Meghan's true age could remain such a closely protected secret. It was not deception in the ordinary sense. It was a skill, one refined through years of navigating the complex intersections of ambition, scrutiny, and identity. And so, as Meghan transitioned from adolescence into young adulthood, the groundwork had already been firmly established. She carried forward the lessons of early friendships, the protective instincts carefully instilled by her mother, the strains and challenges of family dynamics, and a deep understanding of how public perception could be shaped and managed. Each of these early elements, her lessons in discretion, her ability to manage perception, and the grounding influence of her mother, would later collide with the relentless demands of Hollywood, the scrutiny of the royal family, and the unyielding global gaze that followed her every step. But in that moment, before the fame, before the headlines, she was still a young woman trying to balance curiosity, ambition, and caution. And even then, within those formative years, there were already signs that the world would one day be fascinated not only by her accomplishments, but also by the details she and her family deliberately chose to guard from the public. The contradictions, the complexities, and the carefully managed impressions were already shaping her path. While the public could only glimpse fragments of her life, the reality beneath the surface was far more intricate. And this leads us back to Doria Ragland, the woman who shepherded Meghan through these early challenges, who encouraged her gifts, and who protected her most vulnerable moments. Doria held the key to one of the most shocking revelations of all Meghan's true age. This revelation is not just about a number. It represents decades of careful navigation lessons etched into her childhood and strategies refined long before the world even knew her name. But what came next? Meghan's step from these formative years into the high-pressure arena of Hollywood revealed just how powerful those early experiences had been and how fully prepared she was to face a world eager to dissect every detail of her existence. The way she managed this next chapter would lay the foundation for the ultimate disclosure from her mother, a revelation that would stun the public and forever reshape the narrative surrounding Meghan Markle. Have you ever stopped to consider how much of Hollywood is built entirely on illusion? Not just the glittering lights, the red carpets, or the glamour, but the illusions we rarely even think to question. Illusions of age, of image, of timing, of narrative itself. For Meghan Markle, Hollywood was never just a career. It was a proving ground, a place where she learned to master the delicate art of controlling public perception with pinpoint precision. And it is here, in the entertainment capital of the world, that the first pieces of the puzzle begin to reveal why her true age remained hidden for so long. When Meghan first entered the world of acting, she was immediately immersed in an environment where youth was treated as a kind of currency. In Hollywood, the way you looked, how old you appeared, could dictate the roles you landed, the opportunities offered to you, and the very lifespan of your career. Casting directors often made snap judgments at first glance, sometimes even before an audition officially began. And while the public tends to assume that an actor's age is widely known and easily accessible, the truth is very different. The industry is rife with subtle manipulations, strategies designed to blur timelines and conceal details that might limit opportunity. Makeup lighting, wardrobe, and even publicity strategies could be used to craft an image and age that matched what audiences and studios expected to see. Meghan absorbed this lesson quickly. Her earliest roles were a clear signal. On screen, she embodied youthful, energetic characters, often younger than her actual age. Behind the camera, however, she carefully orchestrated every detail of her image. In interviews, in photographs, in press kits, every smile, every pose, every outfit was intentional. A choice made to strengthen the story she wanted the world to believe. And this effort was never only about looking young. It was about shaping and controlling the narrative. If the public assumed she was younger than she truly was, it didn't diminish her skill, it made her more marketable. Each carefully managed detail fed into a broader story, one that Meghan herself had been helping to build from the very beginning. Yet, even as she mastered this balancing act, in Hollywood contradictions began to appear. The public's perception was of someone effortlessly youthful, a woman untouched by time. But colleagues painted a different picture. Long hours on set, exhausting preparation, and the toll of constant surveillance and judgment. Meghan wasn't just performing in front of cameras. She was performing in daily life, reading the room, anticipating reactions, and adjusting her behaviour to meet expectations. Hollywood became her training ground, not only in acting, but in emotional intelligence, resilience, and strategic self-presentation. Within that training, the issue of age transformed into both a tool and a shield. By keeping certain personal details vague, Meghan could navigate Hollywood's pressures without letting something as simple as her true age dictate her opportunities. Yet, there were times when the cracks showed. In interviews, subtle omissions and carefully chosen words suggested timelines that didn't quite add up. Career milestones were described in ways that felt slightly out of sync. Social media posts occasionally left unexplained gaps. These small inconsistencies may have seemed insignificant on their own, but together they created an environment where curiosity grew stronger while definitive answers remained just out of reach. And within the larger cultural context, this ambiguity was not unusual. Hollywood thrives on speculation and mystery. The audience delights in guessing at an actor's real age, their relationships, and the secrets they might be hiding. The media, well aware of this appetite, amplifies every inconsistency, every whispered rumour, every curious gap in the story. For Meghan, this meant that even the smallest discrepancy could ignite intrigue and take on a life of its own. By selectively managing what she revealed and what she withheld, she maintained control of her public identity, but it was a razor's edge. Too much honesty risked immediate judgment and possible rejection. Too little disclosure fueled gossip, doubt, and suspicion. Living in that delicate middle ground became both her greatest strategy and her greatest challenge. And it was within this intersection of personal protection and professional strategy that the seeds of Doria Ragland's eventual revelation were planted. By the time Meghan stepped into the royal sphere, the foundation for controlling how her age was perceived had already been meticulously laid. Yet, even with this deliberate strategy, contradictions never entirely disappeared. Public appearances suggested one age, while personal anecdotes often hinted at another. Friends recalled moments and experiences that did not quite align with what the media portrayed. There were subtle glimpses, small slips where Meghan's true age seemed to surface. These instances sparked whispers of curiosity, waves of speculation, and at times outright disbelief. While much of the public brushed off such details as trivial, they were in fact signpost evidence of the ongoing tension between perception and reality, carefully managed but never fully erased. Each inconsistency, each subtle clue, only added fuel to the intrigue. And then came the transition to royalty, a move that elevated scrutiny to heights far beyond anything Meghan had experienced in Hollywood. The rules had changed. Every smile, every gesture, every phrase she spoke in public was dissected for hidden meaning. And here, the ambiguity she had cultivated in Hollywood became more than a shield, it became a weapon. Age, or rather the uncertainty surrounding it, gave her a unique measure of control in a world where control was so often stripped away. It allowed her to meet royal expectations without laying her entire truth bare to connect with the public while still preserving a private self and to retain autonomy in an environment designed to consume individuality. But here lies the twist. Hollywood had not just trained Meghan to survive, it had prepared her. The years of balancing exposure with privacy, of crafting timelines, of shaping narratives with precision, had given her an extraordinary set of tools. Tools that would prove invaluable as she navigated strict royal protocols, relentless media dissection, and a level of public fascination unmatched anywhere else. And it was these very skills that set the perfect stage for her mother's revelation. Doria's disclosure would not have landed with such explosive force without the ambiguity and narrative control Meghan had cultivated during her Hollywood years. While the public marvelled at her performances on screen, very few realised they were watching the development of a strategist, someone who had mastered the art of narrative control long before the royal spotlight found her. Every role she played, every interview she gave, every perfectly timed appearance on a red carpet was more than performance. It was practice. Practice in curating perception, practice in controlling the story. And though age might have seemed like a trivial detail, it was, in reality, a linchpin, a hidden thread woven through her entire public persona, one that would later become central to public fascination and to Doria Ragland's shocking revelation. But the story did not stop there. The leap from Hollywood celebrity to royal figure would test every one of these carefully sharpened skills. It would magnify the scrutiny, intensify the contradictions, and ultimately set the stage for a truth so startling that it would leave the entire world stunned. And it is this very transition, laden with hidden tensions, unexpected revelations, and carefully orchestrated optics, that we will now begin to explore in the next chapter. Have you ever considered how stepping into a world as rigid and scrutinised as the British royal family could magnify even the smallest, most personal detail for Meghan Markle? One seemingly simple fact, her age suddenly transformed into a focal point, a subtle yet profoundly powerful factor, shaping perception, fueling media narratives, and even influencing interpersonal dynamics behind palace walls. Her move from Hollywood to royalty was not merely a career shift, it was a total reconfiguration of the rules of engagement. What had worked in Hollywood? The cultivated ambiguity, the carefully managed appearances, the artful navigation of public perception was now being put to the test beneath a global microscope. In this new environment, each passing year of age carried weight and meaning far beyond what most people could imagine. When Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry was revealed to the world, the media frenzy was immediate and relentless. Headlines dissected every corner of her life, her career, her friends, her charitable pursuits, and inevitably her age. But here the rules were different. In Hollywood, ambiguity about age could be an asset tolerated and at times even expected. In the monarchy, however, ambiguity collided with centuries of tradition, rigid comparison, and intense scrutiny. Meghan's youthful energy, her modern charisma, and her fresh approach were applauded, but they were also measured against the expectations of the royal institution and against the historical legacies of previous royal brides. Every appearance became a test. Could she rise to embody the role demanded of her? Would she align with traditions built over centuries? In this context, her age was no longer just a private detail, it was a public statement. The media, of course, amplified this dynamic. Tabloids and major news outlets dissected everything about her, her style choices, her body language, her tone of voice. Every smile, every gown, every engagement was analysed not only for its immediate impression, but also for what it implied about her age. Comparisons were unavoidable. How did she measure up to Princess Diana, to Kate Middleton, to other women who had stepped into the royal spotlight before her age became a lens one through which her character, her readiness, and even her relatability were judged and redefined in the court of public opinion. The public was not merely consuming photographs or sound bites, they were consuming fully formed narratives. And within those narratives, age was a subtle yet powerful element, shaping meaning and perception. Behind the polished images, Meghan was walking a tightrope. She was no longer simply an actress performing a role for a camera. She was now a member of one of the most scrutinised families on earth. Protocol dictated her behaviour. Public perception determined her opportunities. And the royal machinery, vast and unrelenting, monitored her every interaction. In such an environment, ambiguity about personal details became more than habit. It became a survival strategy. By keeping certain aspects of her life, including her age, undefined, Meghan preserved a measure of autonomy. She could still influence how she was seen without giving up every private truth for public consumption. Yet, contradictions were impossible to avoid. In the public eye, she was celebrated for her youthful energy, her modern outlook, and her refreshing approach to royal duties. But privately, insiders observed her calculating awareness of timing optics and influence. She understood instinctively that public perception could be guided, that appearances could be carefully curated, and that narratives could be shaped in ways that worked to her advantage. Still, the constant tension between admiration and scrutiny carried an emotional cost. How does one perform flawlessly while under endless observation? How does one remain authentic when every expression, every movement is dissected? And how does one preserve personal boundaries when the very role itself demands exposure? These were the questions that defined Meghan's earliest years as a royal and explained why controlling the narrative around her age was not about vanity at all. It was about survival in a system that left little room for mistakes. The transition also brought to the surface a more subtle layer of age-related judgment within the royal family itself. Like any long-standing institution, the monarchy carries unspoken hierarchies and expectations. Age can grant authority, dictate respect, and silently shape interpersonal dynamics. For Meghan, entering as a relatively young woman with a career already in the public spotlight meant navigating more than just tradition. She had to balance her real experience against her perceived youth, her credibility against her relative newness, her authority against an institution that thrived on hierarchy. These complexities magnified the importance of how she was seen, including how old she appeared or was believed to be. At the same time, Meghan's public engagements highlighted the clash between her Hollywood past and her royal present. The same tools she had used to survive in Hollywood narrative management, timing and calculated ambiguity, were now both her shield and her greatest test within the royal world. In Hollywood, keeping her age ambiguous had given Meghan flexibility. It allowed her to slip seamlessly into different roles and to guide the public narrative in ways that benefited her. But within royalty, that same ambiguity was a double-edged sword. At times an asset, at other times a liability. The public and the press demanded clarity, certainty, and constant comparisons. Every interview, every public appearance, every charitable engagement became a subtle but very real test. Could she fulfill expectations without losing her autonomy? Could she embody the youthful energy expected of a princess, while at the same time reflecting the wisdom and composure demanded of a royal figure? In this sense, age became both a mask and a mirror. A mask because it allowed her to hide parts of herself when necessary. A mirror because it reflected not only how others perceived her, but also how she began to perceive herself. And then there was the reaction of the public. Fans and critics alike scrutinised details that seemed trivial on the surface, yet carried immense weight beneath. The way she posed for a photograph, how she greeted other royals, even her choice of clothing, all of it was read through the filter of age. A youthful glow was celebrated, while a moment of maturity was dissected endlessly. Every move was subject to simultaneous praise and criticism, creating a relentless cycle of expectation and judgment. Meghan's ability to function under this microscope was tested constantly, reinforcing the significance of every personal detail, including the reality of her age. Yet beneath the polished exterior, the emotional reality was far more complex. Meghan was acutely aware of the scrutiny, and that awareness brought with it both immense pressure and sharp clarity. She understood that controlling perception was not a casual effort. It required deliberate planning, precise timing, and an instinctive grasp of cultural expectations. But alongside this, she also had to manage her inner world, her identity, her relationships, and her sense of authenticity. The balance was fragile. Too much disclosure opened the door to judgment and intrusion. Too little transparency fueled endless speculation and rumour. Her age, caught in the middle of these dynamics, became the perfect example of the struggle at once, a personal truth and a public story, both intimate and strategic. Through it all, Doria Ragland's role grew ever more vital. As mother, mentor and confidant, she remained a steady guide through the storm. She understood the costs and the advantages of ambiguity. And by reinforcing discretion, she helped Meghan shield herself in the face of unprecedented global scrutiny. In this way, Doria not only shaped Meghan's resilience, but also laid the groundwork for the revelation that would one day shape the narrative to its core. But Doria also carried knowledge that the public never had access to. It was more than just a fact, it was a perspective, a key that unlocked the deeper narrative tensions shaping Meghan's life. This knowledge would one day culminate in the revelation of Meghan's true age, a disclosure that would not only surprise the public, but also explain the contradictions that had followed her for years. Meanwhile, the media pounced on every milestone. Engagements, weddings, and grand public appearances were examined with surgical precision for clues about her age and her experience. Speculation about her true number of years became entangled with larger questions about preparedness, maturity, and suitability for royal life. Observers asked endlessly, was she old enough to handle the immense responsibilities that came with the crown? Was she young enough to represent a modernising force within the monarchy? How would her Hollywood background translate into the rigid protocols of royal duty? Each of these questions reinforced the immense power of perception, showing clearly why the ambiguity surrounding her age was never just a private matter, it was a public battleground. Contradictions lingered at every turn. On one hand, Meghan was praised for her vitality, her charisma, and her ability to bring a refreshing, modern perspective to the royal family. On the other, those same qualities triggered debate about her true age, her level of experience, and whether she was fully prepared for the pressures of royal responsibility. In this context, age was transformed from a simple number into a lens, one through which her every action, her every word, her every decision was interpreted. Yet, despite the endless speculation, the reality of her age remained hidden, concealed beneath layers of narrative control. And it was precisely this tension, the gap between perception and truth, that would make Doria Ragland's eventual revelation so seismic. By the time Meghan had fully stepped into her royal role, the stage was perfectly set. Public curiosity was at a peak, and private truth was waiting to be revealed. Everything Meghan had learned in Hollywood about managing timelines, shaping narratives, and balancing exposure with privacy had prepared her for this very moment. Each decision she made, each image she projected, each word she spoke had been informed by decades of practice in subtle, deliberate narrative control. And so when the truth about her age finally emerged, it would reverberate far beyond the number itself. It would challenge deeply rooted assumptions, ignite fierce debate, and compel the world to re-evaluate everything it thought it knew about Meghan Markle. Because what Doria Ragland revealed was more than just a birth year. It exposed decades of carefully constructed perception of strategic choices, of a life balanced precariously between public admiration and private strain. And when the world finally heard it, the stage was set not only for controversy, but for fascination and for a story that would grip audiences around the globe. But Doria also carried knowledge that the public never had access to. It was more than just a fact, it was a perspective, a key that unlocked the deeper narrative tensions shaping Meghan's life. This knowledge would one day culminate in the revelation of Meghan's true age, a disclosure that would not only surprise the public, but also explain the contradictions that had followed her for years. Meanwhile, the media pounced on every milestone. Engagements, weddings, and grand public appearances were examined with surgical precision for clues about her age and her experience. Speculation about her true number of years became entangled with larger questions about preparedness, maturity, and suitability for royal life. Observers asked endlessly, was she old enough to handle the immense responsibilities that came with the crown? Was she young enough to represent a modernising force within the monarchy? How would her Hollywood background translate into the rigid protocols of royal duty? Each of these questions reinforced the immense power of perception, showing clearly why the ambiguity surrounding her age was never just a private matter. It was a public battleground. Contradictions lingered at every turn. On one hand, Meghan was praised for her vitality, her charisma, and her ability to bring a refreshing, modern perspective to the royal family. On the other, those same qualities triggered debate about her true age, her level of experience, and whether she was fully prepared for the pressures of royal responsibility. In this context, age was transformed from a simple number into a lens one, through which her every action, her every word, her every decision was interpreted. Yet, despite the endless speculation, the reality of her age remained hidden, concealed beneath layers of narrative control. And it was precisely this tension, the gap between perception and truth, that would make Doria Ragland's eventual revelation so seismic. By the time Meghan had fully stepped into her royal role, the stage was perfectly set. Public curiosity was at a peak, and private truth was waiting to be revealed. Everything Meghan had learned in Hollywood about managing timelines, shaping narratives, and balancing exposure with privacy had prepared her for this very moment. Each decision she made, each image she projected, each word she spoke had been informed by decades of practice in subtle, deliberate narrative control. And so, when the truth about her age finally emerged, it would reverberate far beyond the number itself. It would challenge deeply rooted assumptions, ignite fierce debate, and compel the world to re-evaluate everything it thought it knew about Meghan Markle. Because what Doria Ragland revealed was more than just a birth year. It exposed decades of carefully constructed perception of strategic choices, of a life balanced precariously between public admiration and private strain. And when the world finally heard it, the stage was set not only for controversy, but for fascination, and for a story that would grip audiences around the globe. But Doria also carried knowledge that the public never had access to. It was more than just a fact, it was a perspective, a key that unlocked the deeper narrative tensions shaping Meghan's life. This knowledge would one day culminate in the revelation of Meghan's true age, a disclosure that would not only surprise the public, but also explain the contradictions that had followed her for years. Meanwhile, the media pounced on every milestone. Engagements, weddings, and grand public appearances were examined with surgical precision for clues about her age and her experience. Speculation about her true number of years became entangled with larger questions about preparedness, maturity, and suitability for royal life. Observers asked endlessly, was she old enough to handle the immense responsibilities that came with the crown? Was she young enough to represent a modernising force within the monarchy? How would her Hollywood background translate into the immense rigid protocols of royal duty? Each of these questions reinforced the immense power of perception, showing clearly why the ambiguity surrounding her age was never just a private matter, it was a public battleground. Contradictions lingered at every turn. On one hand, Meghan was praised for her vitality, her charisma, and her ability to bring a refreshing, modern perspective to the royal family. On the other, those same qualities triggered debate about her true age, her level of experience, and whether she was fully prepared for the pressures of royal responsibility. In this context, age was transformed from a simple number into a lens, one through which her every action, her every word, her every decision was interpreted. Yet, despite the endless speculation, the reality of her age remained hidden, concealed beneath layers of narrative control. And it was precisely this tension, the gap between perception and truth, that would make Doria Ragland's eventual revelation so seismic. By the time Meghan had fully stepped into her royal role, the stage was perfectly set. Public curiosity was at a peak, and private truth was waiting to be revealed. Everything Meghan had learned in Hollywood about managing timelines, shaping narratives, and balancing exposure with privacy had prepared her for this very moment. Each decision she made, each image she projected, each word she spoke had been informed by decades of practice in subtle, deliberate narrative control. And so when the truth about her age finally emerged, it would reverberate far beyond the number itself. It would challenge deeply rooted assumptions, ignite fierce debate, and compel the world to reevaluate everything it thought it knew about Meghan Markle. Because what Doria Ragland revealed was more than just a birth year. It exposed decades of carefully constructed perception, of strategic choices, of a life balanced precariously between public admiration and private strain. And when the world finally heard it, the stage was set, not only for controversy, but for fascination, and for a story that would grip audiences around the globe. There were no theatrics, no unnecessary embellishments, no sensational gimmicks. Doria's revelation was delivered with a calm authority that made it impossible to ignore. And yet beneath its simplicity, the statement carried layers of meaning. It was not only about transparency, but also about family loyalty, about the profound influence of personal truth in shaping public narratives that had for so long been dominated by speculation and assumption. The timing of the interview was far from coincidental. Public curiosity about Meghan had been building steadily, fueled by relentless media coverage, scattered interviews, and subtle contradictions within her public image. The world was already restless, eager for answers, hungry for insight, and prepared to scrutinise every detail. It was into this environment that Doria's disclosure arrived perfectly timed to maximise its impact. In an instant, every viewer, every journalist, every fan was drawn into a global conversation. Assumptions were challenged, long-held beliefs were re-evaluated. The emotional weight of the moment could not be overstated. This was not simply a revelation about numbers, it was about family dynamics, about identity, and about love. Doria's role as Meghan's mother mentor and confidant lent enormous credibility to her words, while simultaneously underscoring the deep bond between mother and daughter. This was not gossip. It was affirmation. It was a protective disclosure that framed Meghan's life in a way only someone from within her family ever could. The details were important, but so too were the subtleties, Doria's steady tone, her unhurried pacing, her steady eye contact. These elements reassured as much as the information itself, signalling that this truth was shared not for scandal, but out of loyalty, love, and authenticity. Public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted with debates, memes, and theories. Questions came in a flood. Why had this detail never been clarified before? Was the ambiguity deliberate? Was it an act of privacy, a strategy, or merely the result of media assumptions that went uncorrected? Each question opened new layers of discussion, shining a light on the complexity of celebrity perception and the delicate dance between private truth and public narrative. And then a striking realization began to spread. The interview didn't just reveal a new fact, it cast fresh light on contradictions that had lingered for years. Past interviews, old statements, and fragments of media coverage suddenly looked different in retrospect. Timelines that once seemed harmlessly inconsistent now stood out as markers of a deeper hidden truth. Audiences began retracing her career milestones, her public appearances, and the defining moments of her life, trying to reconcile what they thought they knew with the truth Doria had finally unveiled. And in retracing those details, the public uncovered a web of strategic narrative management that had been quietly in place for decades. Even the coverage of the interview itself reflected this deeper intrigue. Media outlets dissected Doria's phrasing, noting the subtle emphasis on certain words, and considered how her choice of language might reshape Meghan's carefully constructed public image. Commentators debated the timing of a disclosure, speculated about Doria's motivations, and examined the wider implications for both Hollywood and the royal establishment. The revelation became a prism, a lens through which every past action, every public decision, and every carefully staged appearance was re-evaluated. The ripple effect spread quickly, reaching far beyond the single interview. Fan discussions reignited. Analysts drew historical comparisons to past royal figures. And yet, even with the clarity of Doria's statement, lingering questions refused to fade. Why had Meghan's age remained clouded for so long? How did this truth align or conflict with her past interviews and appearances? And perhaps most intriguingly, what does this disclosure mean for the grand narrative that Hollywood and the monarchy alike had worked to construct around her? These questions fueled the fire of public fascination, ensuring that curiosity would not wane but deepen. The interview had delivered a startling truth, but it also opened the door to broader exploration, endless speculation, and a narrative more complex than anyone anticipated. Beyond public and media reactions, the interview also underscored the profound emotional weight of family disclosure. Revealing something as intimate as age in a world as relentlessly scrutinised as Meghan's was an act of enormous delicacy. Doria's choice to speak with clarity, confidence and restraint conveyed both strength and compassion. It reminded the world that family knowledge carries an authority of its own, an authority stronger than rumours, stronger than speculation, and even stronger than the so-called facts once reported by the press. The emotional resonance of the moment was amplified by the clear sense that such a revelation was not casual. It was rare, deliberate, and deeply considered. But the story did not end with Doria's calm statement. Instead, it set into motion a cascade of responses, some predictable, others entirely unforeseen. Friends, colleagues, commentators, and even public figures began to weigh in each response, adding another layer to an unfolding narrative that was far from finished. The implications for Meghan's image, both in Hollywood and within the royal sphere, became the subject of heated debate. Social media erupted with side-by-side analyses comparing past photographs, archived interviews, and career milestones against the newly revealed truth. Every contradiction, every unexplained gap in her timeline, every inconsistency that had once been ignored suddenly carried weight. The public was not passively absorbing this new information. They were actively reinterpreting it, reassessing everything they thought they understood about one of the most closely watched figures in the world. And perhaps most importantly, Doria's revelation redefined Meghan's story in a profoundly human context. Age, after all, is not merely a number. It is deeply entwined with perception, expectation, and identity. By finally confirming the truth, Doria encouraged audiences to reconsider not just what they believed about Meghan, but also how they interpret the lives of public figures more broadly. Her disclosure underscored the vast gap between personal truth and public perception, and highlighted the extraordinary skill, resilience, and strategy required to manage such a gap for so long. Yet even as the dust began to settle from this seismic disclosure, one question remained in the air. What other truths had been carefully managed, withheld, or blurred into ambiguity? Doria's revelation was monumental, but it was clearly not the entire story. There were layers yet to peel back, implications yet to be examined, and hidden dynamics still to surface, insights that promise to challenge assumptions, provoke heated debate, and hold the attention of audiences worldwide. And it is precisely these revelations, the ones that followed in the wake of Doria's words, that form the focus of the next chapter. An exploration of the aftermath, the media frenzy, and the extraordinary ripple effects of a single moment of honesty from a mother to the world. When Doria Ragland revealed that Meghan Markle was 50 years old, the world reacted in ways few could have foreseen. It was not just another headline, not just another number casually thrown into the mix. It became a catalyst, a spark that ignited a global conversation filled with debate, curiosity, and disbelief. The public's response was immediate, visceral, and intense. Social media platforms lit up like wildfire. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook each became battlefields of competing theories, cutting memes, words of praise, harsh criticism, and unfiltered astonishment. People were not merely absorbing a fact, they were grappling with the jarring clash between what they had long assumed and what had now been confirmed. For more than a decade, Meghan had been seen as a youthful, almost ageless figure in both Hollywood and the royal arena. Her energy, poise, and elegance suggested someone in her late 30s or early 40s. To the public, this perception felt seamless. It matched the media narratives, the interviews, the glossy magazine spreads, and the countless public appearances that had defined her image. And then, in an instant, that perception collided with reality. 50, a number that made both fans and critics stop in their tracks, forcing them to reassess everything they thought they knew. The immediate reaction was a curious blend of shock and admiration. Many expressed awe at her ability to maintain such a radiant appearance, marvelling at how someone of 50 could embody the vitality, grace, and elegance that Meghan so effortlessly projected. The comments poured in. How does she stay so youthful? How does she carry such energy under constant public pressure? These reactions only reinforced her status as a role model, someone who defied conventional expectations of age, someone who turned the usual narrative upside down. Yet at the same time, the revelation challenged societal assumptions, exposing how deeply ingrained ideas about youth shape the way people perceive and admire public figures. But the shock quickly gave way to debate. Across the internet, people began dissecting timelines, revisiting photographs, and aligning career milestones with the new truth revealed by Doria. Bloggers and online commentators constructed meticulous timelines, combing through every interview, every appearance, every detail, searching for clues. Was this ambiguity an oversight? Was it a deliberate, strategic decision? Or was it a nuanced blend of personal privacy and media manipulation? Every detail became evidence. Award ceremonies, press appearances, candid photos, social events, all were re-examined under this new light. Fans argued fiercely over whether Meghan had intentionally misled the public or whether the ambiguity had been a protective choice, a shield against an intrusive world. Meanwhile, tabloids and traditional media outlets seized the moment. Headlines screamed across front pages. The truth revealed: Meghan's hidden age shocks the world. Hollywood's youngest 50-year-old. Television pundits and columnists dove into the frenzy. Some focused on the stark gap between perception and reality. Others speculated about what this meant for family dynamics, or what ripple effects might reach into the royal household. The story had evolved far beyond a simple revelation about age. It had become a prism, through which her entire life, career, and carefully cultivated image were being reinterpreted. And the frenzy extended well beyond newsrooms. Social media amplified every possible angle, turning the revelation into a cultural wildfire. Memes spread rapidly, mixing humour with astonishment, exaggerating the shock for entertainment while fueling disbelief. Influencers dissected old photographs, producing side-by-side comparisons and carefully constructed timelines. Comment sections became miniature battlegrounds, where users argued over assumptions, expressed admiration, or criticised what they saw as manipulation. Even those who had never paid attention to royal news suddenly found themselves pulled into the debate. What began as a piece of celebrity gossip had crossed into the realm of cultural conversation. It was no longer just about Meghan, it was about ageing media perception and the way public identities are constructed and consumed. Yet the reaction wasn't limited to the outside world. Within royal circles and Hollywood networks, quiet conversations began. Staff members, colleagues, and acquaintances of Meghan reflected on the disclosure, considering its personal and professional implications. Would this affect her standing within the royal family? Would it alter her public image or shift the kinds of opportunities available to her moving forward? For some, the confirmation of her age was almost irrelevant, overshadowed by her influence, her charitable work, and her undeniable presence. For others, however, it reframed long-held assumptions, casting previous narratives in a different light and forcing them to reinterpret past interactions, memories, and anecdotes. The emotional spikes in the responses were unmistakable. Supporters rallied quickly, praising Meghan for her composure, resilience, and authenticity, even if the truth had come indirectly through her mother. Critics, meanwhile, dissected the motives and implications, questioning why this information had not been clarified earlier, and debating whether it had been withheld deliberately. For many, the revelation stirred something deeper, a personal reflection on society's obsession with age, especially for women in the public eye. How often do we judge worth or relevance based on perceived youthfulness? How much weight do we place on numbers rather than achievements, character, or contribution? These broader questions soon became entangled with Meghan's personal story, lifting the conversation far beyond celebrity headlines. And yet, public reactions revealed an inherent contradiction. Some people outright rejected the claim, clinging to previous media reports or highlighting perceived inconsistencies in the timeline. Others embraced it, framing it as a testament to Meghan's vitality, elegance, and ability to defy expectations. This stark divide only heightened engagement. Debates spilled across online forums, talk shows, podcasts, and panel discussions. Each new article, video, or social media post became part of a feedback loop, amplifying the frenzy and ensuring the story remained firmly in the public consciousness for weeks to come. Analysts were quick to point out that Doria's revelation did more than simply disclose a fact, it effectively seized control of global attention. In a media landscape where stories are constant and fleeting, this announcement created a singular, concentrated moment of focus. People felt compelled to talk about it, to share their opinions, to dissect every angle. And in that moment, it became about more than Meghan herself. It became about the collision of personal disclosure, public fascination, and media amplification. Age suddenly transformed into a touchstone, a spark for broader conversations about authenticity, the mechanics of celebrity image management, and the societal expectations that weigh so heavily on women in the public eye. Yet beneath the frenzy lay a quieter, more subtle truth, the sheer power of narrative control. By allowing Doria to confirm the detail in an intimate, carefully structured interview, the disclosure carried both authority and humanity. It minimised potential backlash while maximising credibility, framing the truth as a revelation rooted in love and loyalty rather than spectacle. This was not a fact dropped casually into conversation. It was delivered with precision context, emotional resonance, and quiet authority. As a result, audiences could not simply dismiss it, nor could they ignore the broader implications. The moment was not just informational, it was profoundly strategic. And yet, even as the public processed, the revelation questions lingered stubbornly. Why had Meghan's age remained ambiguous for so long? How had her Hollywood career and her royal experience combined to allow such a fundamental detail to remain obscured? And, perhaps most provocatively, what did this mean for the larger story? Surrounding Meghan's life, career, and identity, these questions kept the discussion alive, prompting endless research, speculation, and fresh waves of media coverage. As the frenzy unfolded, it became undeniable that Doria Ragland's disclosure had done far more than confirm a number. It had upended assumptions, stirred emotional reactions, and reframed the global dialogue about Meghan. Just as importantly, it had set the stage for deeper exploration of timelines, motivations, and the hidden dynamics that shape how public figures are perceived. And the ripple effects were only beginning. Because while the world debated deeper layers of contradiction, strategic omissions, and emotional undercurrents waited beneath the surface, ready to come into focus. These elements would later provide context for why this revelation mattered so profoundly. The story was far from over. And it is this very web of intrigue, analysis, and speculation that we will explore in the next chapter, delving into how age became not merely a number, but a lens one through which every element of Meghan Markle's life has been interpreted and understood. Analysts were quick to point out that Doria's revelation did more than simply disclose a fact, it effectively seized control of global attention. In a media landscape where stories are constant and fleeting, this announcement created a singular, concentrated moment of focus. People felt compelled to talk about it, to share their opinions, to dissect every angle. And in that moment, it became about more than Meghan herself. It became about the collision of personal disclosure, public fascination, and media amplification. Age suddenly transformed into a touchstone, a spark for broader conversations about authenticity, the mechanics of celebrity image management, and the societal expectations that weigh so heavily on women in the public eye. Yet beneath the frenzy lay a quieter, more subtle truth, the sheer power of narrative control. By allowing Doria to confirm the detail in an intimate, carefully structured interview, the disclosure carried both authority and humanity. It minimised potential backlash while maximising credibility, framing the truth as a revelation rooted in love and loyalty rather than spectacle. This was not a fact dropped casually into conversation. It was delivered with precision context, emotional resonance, and quiet authority. As a result, audiences could not simply dismiss it, nor could they ignore the broader implications. The moment was not just informational, it was profoundly strategic. And yet, even as the public processed, the revelation questions lingered stubbornly. Why had Meghan's age remained ambiguous for so long? How had her Hollywood career and her royal experience combined to allow such a fundamental detail to remain obscured? And perhaps most provocatively, what did this mean for the larger story? Surrounding Meghan's life, career, and identity, these questions kept the discussion alive, prompting endless research, speculation, and fresh waves of media coverage. As the frenzy unfolded, it became undeniable that Doria Ragland's disclosure had done far more than confirm a number. It had upended assumptions, stirred emotional reactions, and reframed the global dialogue about Meghan. Just as importantly, it had set the stage for deeper exploration of timelines, motivations, and the hidden dynamics that shape how public figures are perceived. And the ripple effects were only beginning, because while the world debated deeper layers of contradiction and strategic omissions and emotional undercurrents waited beneath the surface, ready to come into focus. These elements would later provide context for why this revelation mattered so profoundly. The story was far from over. And it is this very web of intrigue, analysis, and speculation that we will explore in the next chapter, delving into how age became not merely a number, but a lens one through which every element of Meghan Markle's life has been interpreted and understood. Analysts were quick to point out that Doria's revelation did more than simply disclose a fact, it effectively seized control of global attention. In a media landscape where stories are constant and fleeting, this announcement created a singular concentrated moment of focus. People felt compelled to talk about it, to share their opinions, to dissect every angle. And in that moment, it became about more than Meghan herself. It became about the collision of personal disclosure, public fascination, and media amplification. Age suddenly transformed into a touchstone, a spark for broader conversations about authenticity, the mechanics of celebrity image management, and the societal expectations that weigh so heavily on women in the public eye. Yet beneath the frenzy lay a quieter, more subtle truth, the sheer power of narrative control. By allowing Doria to confirm the detail in an intimate, carefully structured interview, the disclosure carried both authority and humanity. It minimised potential backlash while maximising credibility, framing the truth as a revelation rooted in love and loyalty rather than spectacle. This was not a fact dropped casually into conversation. It was delivered with precision context, emotional resonance, and quiet authority. As a result, audiences could not simply dismiss it. Nor could they ignore the broader implications. The moment was not just informational, it was profoundly strategic. And yet, even as the public processed, the revelation questions lingered stubbornly. Why had Meghan's age remained ambiguous for so long? How had her Hollywood career and her royal experience combined to allow such a fundamental detail to remain obscured? And perhaps most provocatively, what did this mean for the larger story surrounding Meghan's life, career, and identity? These questions kept the discussion alive, prompting endless research, speculation, and fresh waves of media coverage. As the frenzy unfolded, it became undeniable that Doria Ragland's disclosure had done far more than confirm a number. It had upended assumptions, stirred emotional reactions, and reframed the global dialogue about Meghan. Just as importantly, it had set the stage for deeper exploration of timelines, motivations, and the hidden dynamics that shape how public figures are perceived. And the ripple effects were only beginning. Because while the world debated deeper layers of contradiction, strategic omissions, and emotional undercurrents waited beneath the surface, ready to come into focus. These elements would later provide context for why this revelation mattered so profoundly. The story was far from over. And it is this very web of intrigue, analysis, and speculation that we will explore in the next chapter, delving into how age became not merely a number, but a lens, one through which every element of Meghan Markle's life has been interpreted and understood. This lesson would prove invaluable, as Meghan stepped into the world of royalty, where the stakes were infinitely higher and the scrutiny relentless. The contrast between her true age and her outward appearance became a constant source of fascination. Audiences marvelled at her youthful glow, speculating endlessly about her skincare routines, diet, exercise, and lifestyle habits. This fascination was fueled by society's deep-rooted obsession with youth, especially for women in positions of influence. In a culture that often ties worth to age, Meghan's ability to maintain such vibrancy blurred expectations. And when Doria Ragland revealed her true age, it forced the public to confront that contrast, directly generating both admiration and disbelief. Yet living this double life came with a cost. The constant need to manage perception while concealing personal truths carried immense emotional weight. It created stress isolation and the unsettling sense of existing in two parallel worlds, one public, one private. Meghan's journey underscored the emotional complexity of celebrity life, where public image collides with personal identity, and where something as simple as age becomes both a shield and a burden. This duality also shaped her relationships. Friends, colleagues, and even family members often found themselves navigating the delicate line between Meghan's carefully curated public persona and her private self. Trust became paramount. Who could be confided in who? Would respect boundaries, and who might exploit the tension between image and reality? Balancing these dynamics required sharp judgment and profound emotional intelligence qualities Meghan displayed consistently. It also created an atmosphere where insights from trusted family members, especially Doria, carried exceptional weight. Doria's words provided not only context, but also credibility to truths the public had long speculated about. The media naturally intensified the tension. Headlines, opinion pieces, and endless commentary zeroed in on perceived contradictions. Every appearance was examined under a magnifying glass. Was she too youthful for her reported age? Did her behaviour reflect the maturity expected of a royal figure? Was her vitality genuine or the result of careful curation? These questions reinforced the necessity of maintaining rigorous control over her public image. The revelation of her age only heightened the visibility of these contrasts, sparking widespread debate and analysis. And in many ways, the duality of age versus appearance reflects broader societal dynamics. Our collective discomfort with aging, the pressures placed on women to embody timeless youth, and the tendency to equate image with identity. Meghan's story therefore became not only personal but cultural, forcing audiences to examine their own assumptions about age, authenticity, and value. In a culture fixated on appearance, perception can carry as much weight, if not more, than reality itself. Meghan's story is a powerful example of how public figures navigate this treacherous terrain, constantly balancing authenticity with the demands of visibility, admiration, and expectation. It is a lesson in strategy, in resilience, and in the intricate dance of protecting personal truth in a world where every detail is magnified and dissected. Yet, no matter how carefully perception is managed, contradictions inevitably surface. Public perception can never align perfectly with reality. Audiences notice the small inconsistencies, rumours gain traction, and curiosity grows stronger. In Meghan's case, her mother's revelation finally crystallised whispers that had lingered for years. The age the world had long assumed was wrong. This disclosure did more than correct a number. It validated the tension between Meghan's public image and her private reality, shining a light on the extraordinary skill it had taken to maintain that delicate balance. And this raises a critical question. How did this dual existence shape Meghan's decisions, relationships, and experiences within the royal family? Managing perception in Hollywood was one challenge. But navigating centuries-old traditions, rigid hierarchies, and relentless global scrutiny was something altogether different. Within the palace walls, every gesture, every appearance, every word carried consequence. The gap between her private truth and her public narrative became a vital tool, one that allowed her to assert agency, maintain credibility, and preserve a sense of control in an environment designed to strip it away. This duality also created opportunities for empowerment. By maintaining ambiguity around her age and around other personal details, Meghan could shape expectations, push back against stereotypes, and exert influence in ways that might otherwise have been denied to her. It was never about deception. It was about strategy, resilience, and self-preservation. This approach enabled her to succeed in Hollywood, to transition into the royal world, and to endure the suffocating media scrutiny with a level of sophistication few fully understood. But here is the twist. The double life was never just about control or strategy. It was also profoundly human. Beneath the carefully curated exterior existed real emotions, real vulnerabilities, and real sacrifice. Managing perception required adaptability, discretion, and a constant awareness of how each move would reverberate publicly. It demanded emotional intelligence, but it also exacted a cost. The revelation of her age laid bare this dynamic, inviting audiences to see not just the artistry of narrative management, but the lived human experience beneath it. The quiet resilience of someone navigating an impossible balance between self and spectacle. And as the public tried to reconcile the striking contrast between Meghan's youthful appearance and her actual age fascination only grew stronger. Fans, critics, and commentators plunged into endless debates, poring over old timelines, photographs, and interviews. Every anecdote, every public appearance, every milestone was re-examined with fresh scrutiny. Age was no longer just a detail. It became the lens through which her entire life, career, and influence were reconsidered. Yet for all the attention and speculation, the story was far from finished. Beneath the surface lay deeper layers, subtler contradictions, and hidden narratives waiting to be revealed. Insights that would not only shed light on Meghan's true age, but also on the broader dynamics of her journey, her relationships, her strategies, and her path from Hollywood to royalty. These are the very layers we turn to now, the revelations and contradictions that hold the power to reshape how her story is understood. Welcome to Royal Insider Perspectives, where we uncover what those closest to Meghan saw, experienced, and ultimately chose to reveal about her life behind closed doors. Have you ever wondered what life is truly like behind palace walls, far from the cameras, the red carpets, and the headlines that circle the globe? For Meghan Markle, the insider perspective reveals a hidden world, one defined by quiet pressures, whispered judgments, and carefully choreographed appearances. Those working within the royal household notice things the public will never see, the subtle details, the fleeting conversations, the private tensions behind every glittering event. Through their eyes, Meghan's age and the way it was perceived took on a whole new significance. Inside the palace, perception is not simply important, it is everything. Every gesture, every word, every interaction is observed, weighed, and interpreted. And in this environment, age is not just a number. It is a signal of authority, of experience, of maturity. It determines how a person is viewed, how much influence they wield, and how well they are thought to fit within an institution built on hierarchy and tradition.